first player that's got to be spoken about is obviously you've already raised. He has already played for Chelsea. You watching full 90 will have seen more of him than I have. And having said that, though, we have seen him in the Premier League for a few years now, and that is obviously Joao Pedro. Now, I watched a bit of Adam Cleary yesterday to try and see if I could get my mind shifted on the signing, because for me, I just made the point earlier about the fact that Chelsea cleaned a bigger squad, and this is clearly what this is. This is a squad signing, because I don't look at Joao Pedro as a player who walks into the Chelsea starting 11. I think that there are names ahead of him in every position on the team sheet, especially given his scoring output, which really isn't good outside of penalties. It's average at best. And obviously, it's going to be very interesting to see what he does. But after, obviously, I watched Adam Cleary, you obviously on Son of Chelsea spoke to Ryan Adset about Joao Pedro, and this is what he had to say.
He's the bad guy, right? He can score goals when you don't necessarily deserve it. He can change games. He can make things happen when your back's against the walls. He's a big game player. He's someone that's going to step up to big moments 100%. You don't think he's going to miss a penalty, that's for sure. So those sort of iconic moments you miss from Joao, but then it does mix in with a lot of inconsistency. He doesn't always have good games. He does cover a lot of distance. That's worth mentioning. I knew Caicedo wouldn't flop, and I think that I've got that same feeling with Joao Pedro.
Right, Dan, let's go through that. Your thoughts on obviously Joao Pedro, and obviously after speaking to Ryan, were they adapted in any way, shape, or form?
It's the same for both signings, really. We're going to speak about here. I'm mostly positive about them. I'm more positive about Joao Pedro, just because watching his career basically a lot longer. I remember watching him in his early days at Watford and being impressed and sort of tracking his development as you do with certain random players that for whatever reason either you have connections to other clubs, so you're watching players as they develop and seeing how they go. And I think Joao Pedro's development is interesting because when he came to England, when he started playing for Watford, he was kind of very slight, small, wide player / inside forward. You sort of thought, well, he's maybe never going to be good enough to be kind of a leading player. And then obviously as he's got older and he played for Brighton, especially last year, I started to notice, okay, there's a more physical side to his game. There's a side where you actually could see him play as a bulkier centre forward than maybe I would have anticipated, added with the all-round flair and kind of wide attributes he brings. He's not, as I said, there's much more to him than that. We've only got one cameo to go off, and as Mykhailo Mudryk proved, you shouldn't base the entirety of a player's trajectory at your club based on a off the bench cameo, because that can be very misleading. However, I think if you've seen the analysis from people, even the likes of mate of mine, someone I respect, and I think both we respect in the EFC, very, very positive about Joao Pedro, and even going as far as to say I could see him starting as our centre forward, because he actually did come on the pitch as a centre forward. He I think it was quite notable actually that Nicholas Jackson was there and Maresca didn't use him. He went instinctively to Joao Pedro, and Pedro played as a centre forward. There were times where we hit it towards him central, which I already spoke about, and I think as Ryan said when I spoke to him, there's a nice hybrid kind of attribute to Joao Pedro. He can maybe be that forceful, confrontational number 9 if you need him in certain occasions. He's got a bit of pace about him that can maybe play a bit more transitional, but he can play around a focal point as well, which he has done for Brighton as well, more so off the left than off the right. But, I think it's a good tool to have. And I think one of the things that hits home about this season, although it's positive that Chelsea have gone so deep in this tournament and we hope we can win it, is it's going to be taxing on the players. It's going to be taxing on the group, and rotation needs to be on point. It needs to be something that's a lot better than last season, because there's no gift of the Conference League where Maresca on a Thursday midweek can change 11 players and his team still walks out, wins, and we move on. He ain't going to be able to do that. The only time he's going to be able to do that in the first few months of the season is probably the League Cup third round, if you get like a League 2 team at home. So really, the squad has to be a lot more integrated. It has to be a lot more, I think, dynamic and robust to deal with that, with the likelihood, the inevitability of injury, of suspension, of form dropping, and all that stuff. So I think as a Swiss Army knife type player, I think Joao Pedro is an interesting tool to have for Maresca. How he's used and whether Joao Pedro can elevate his game enough to feel like a signing that, really elevates us is one thing. But the one thing I would say is, if you look at the players Chelsea have actually signed from Brighton, all the jokes aside, 2 out of the 3 have been good to excellent. Outfield players, that is. Moises Caicedo is, I think, Chelsea's best player right now. Cucurella has become one of our most valuable and consistent players. And then the other guy. So there is reason to be positive.
There is. I think my worry when it comes to Swiss Army knife-esque players is we have too many of them now. And I get PTSD when Chelsea talk about the Swiss Army knife type striker, or is he a winger, or is he a 10, or is he a false 9? Because that player now plays for Arsenal. He's not
but we don't want the Joao theories and the Kai debates to re-emerge. I'm not, there has to be a fine balance between, I don't want to sit here in April, right, of 26 and still have conversations about what is his best position in kind of a negative way. I want it to be a positive conversation. I want it to be, well, do you play him here in this certain game? And actually, maybe in this game, he's more suited here. But he's still impactful. That's the point. That's the end point. It doesn't matter where he's playing. He's got to be impactful. But I think that the good thing about a player like Pedro, I think the difference is with, say, you think back to a Timo Werner, you think back to a Kai Havertz, and those players were big, like, statement blockbuster signings in the time they arrived, and they were always marketed and framed, rightly so, because of the expense, as these are big, these have to be like defining players in Chelsea's system. At the very least, I think with a Joao Pedro, with a Jamie Gittins, these are not players that, I think players that could be great first teamers, but I don't think many people are looking at them. Just on the discourse I've seen, I don't think anyone's bigging them up to be, this is like game changing. This is like the guy that's going to come in and is going to play 9 games out of 10 and he has to be the superstar. I don't think the pressure is on Joao Pedro to be that. So hopefully that maybe changes the dynamic and helps. But I'm still, I think I'm just looking at the player, and I think, I know penalties do count. Like I know
they count. Ways,
I know what you're getting at, right? I know what you're getting right. Yeah, he does. It's not a bunch of open. It's not open play goals. But you got to factor in the team he's playing for. I think you always have to factor that in. Like, what happens if he moves into a team with a better caliber of player? And from what I saw, I think there's reason to be optimistic, particularly if he's used as a centre forward, and whether that is something that Maresca is now going to actively pursue. Because we've only got, when did he come on? I mean, it was literally straight after Palmeiras equalised. So I think 52nd, 53rd minute. So over half an hour, nearly 40, probably around 40 minutes he got to play. So it's still a small sample size.
Yes, but I'm not basing my theories on Joao Pedro as a signing off of those 35 minutes. I know you know, I understand, but it's just to be clear. Like, for me, I appreciate why we signed him. I could see the qualities, but if you're going to play up front, Chelsea's biggest issue, and it's not just last season, it's been Chelsea's issue since Diego Costa left. Chelsea cannot score goals at the top end of the pitch. They can't. And that was only reinforced when our highest goal scorer only a couple of years ago was Jorginho with penalties. So if Chelsea are to progress and to proceed, as you and I have discussed, and push on, I'm very much in the mindset of, okay, well, this guy's not going to be the starting striker because he can't score goals outside of penalties. His numbers prove that. The way he plays proves that. And you talk about a player in the surroundings that they were in. Liam Delap still scored a good amount of goals in an Ipswich side last season.
Yeah.
You know, there's a player there which I think should be the starting striker for Chelsea. Right now, unless Chelsea dip into the market and do sign a big name like a Gyökeres, who obviously looks like he's going to Arsenal, or they do decide to go back in for Victor Osimhen and make that statement signing. But look, for me, I just don't see Joao Pedro as a serious needle mover. I see him as a good option, as somebody to come in and make a difference on the odd occasion, or good rotation, and somebody who can offer something to Chelsea. And obviously, I sit here and I say that hoping I'm proven wrong. And in April, when me and you are discussing his position, we talk about how important he is for this Chelsea team, and he's absolutely unbelievable. He's irreplaceable. But for someone who I don't think is that much of a needle mover, £60 million is a lot of money. A lot of money. And I do worry that that's money which Chelsea could be spending on a needle mover rather than somebody who is a good squad player, can make a bit of a difference here and there. But realistically, if you look at what Chelsea already have, he's not really, for me anyway, adding that much.
Yeah, I mean, we will see. We will see whether, you know, it does prove a valid use of money. I think that's something that, you know, we can't assess right now. We have to assess it in, you know, across the course of the season. And that's with a lot of these signings, right? But I think that also, like, we know fees are massively inflated. I think that's also another thing. And also, our sporting directors are kind of famous now for being, you know, flipped upside down and, you know, shake until they get all the money. I actually almost think that sometimes, like, the negotiations must go of like Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart asking Brighton if they could pay more money for players. It feels like sometimes, and then being absolutely stunned that Chelsea are willing to overpay. So there's that too. And I sometimes wonder, you know, are we being too harsh on a player? The fee that they get bought for is out of their control. Like Moises Caicedo's fee is absolutely insane, but no one's talking about his fee anymore because objectively on the pitch, he has improved Chelsea in a big way. Is anyone really talking
but
about that? I feel like
Moises Caicedo was a needle mover. That's a signing where if you look at the fee and you look at the player that came in, that is right. You are here to make a difference. That is the only reason I look at Moises Caicedo, and I think that's that. I think I worry, and it's the same for Gittins. Obviously, we're getting up to as well. I feel he's more of an understandable signing because of Chelsea's lack of depth on the left-hand side. But I do look at that front line now, and then the issue we have, which, and I know. I know it sounds negative, right? I am, if I'm very honest, I am a glass half empty kind of guy. I want to be real and look at the situation, and I want to look at the track record we have, right? Chelsea's model is evidently now buy a player, flip a player. That's what it is, right? And it's a whole trading thing. So with that being said, as you mentioned, Chelsea got a bomb squad now, right? You've got Nkunku in there who's going to be needing to go. João Felix needs to go. Raheem Sterling needs to go. This is just the front line, by the way. We don't know what's going to happen with Tyreek George. You know, is he going to want to stay or is he going to want to go because he's not going to be guaranteed as many minutes? You know, there's a whole Mikhailo Mudryk as well. What's happening with him? You know, he's a different situation. But those four straight away, that's just off the top of my head. I'm going, okay. Well, Chelsea are bringing more people in, but these outgoings need to happen fast so that we can actually understand how this squad shapes up. Because right now, it felt like it was an opportunistic signing rather than a necessary one. Because, of course, he looked like he was set to go to Newcastle and all of a sudden we swoop in and it's a done deal. That's what I'm trying to understand. I don't understand the value that he brings to the team, personally. And that's me talking in terms of the fee and the role that he's playing right now, which is obviously set to change. And this is obviously very off, let's be honest, very off the cuff in terms of how I'm thinking about this. And I've thought about it during the week. Obviously, I was on TalkSport at the beginning of the week talking about it, where I was a bit like, this doesn't make sense to me. and I want to see it work. Despite being a very negative guy on this, I want to see it work. I never want to see somebody come into Chelsea and fail. That's just not in my mindset, and it's not something I think. Unfortunately, people think that some people do think like that because they're being negative. But I'm just trying to look at it and go, what does he actually bring to this team? Because what Chelsea didn't need at all, based on last season, was just another name thrown into the pile. They needed somebody who was a name that was going to come in and make a difference. That's my only issue with this signing.